The first time Eli Mercer saw her, she didn't speak a word. Not when he pressed a broom into her hands, not when she hauled water from the well, shoulders straining under the rope, not even when she scraped dried blood from the floorboards where a half-dead coyote had limped in during last month's storm. Her face was quiet, unreadable, the kind of quiet that feels like it's hiding something. She was small, maybe late 20s, dressed in clothes patched more times than the cloth could bear, boots one step from giving way, yet her spine never bent, her hands never slowed. By dusk, his cabin was clean enough to shame the day it was built. He placed a silver coin on the table. She didn't count it, didn't even touch it while he watched. She only nodded, wiped her palms on her apron, and walked away out the door, down the path toward the hills. No horse, no wagon, no man waiting for her at the bend, just the slow fade of her figure into the tree line until the shadows swallowed her whole. He told himself it was nothing. She was just another hired hand passing through. But the next week, she returned. Same hour, same silence, same thoroughness that seemed less like skill and more like survival. By the third visit, he found himself watching her more than the work, the way she moved, as if each step cost her, the way her eyes flicked toward sound like a deer in hunting season. By the fourth, he began to wonder where she went at night, and by the fifth, he could no longer pretend he didn't care. Because there are two kinds of silences in the world, the kind that keeps the peace and the kind that hides a storm. And Eli Mercer had just hired the storm. Eli told himself he wasn't following her, that he was just checking the north fence as dusk settled in and frost licked the edges of the clearing. But when he saw her slip between the trees again, disappearing into a place no wagon road touched, he saddled his horse without a real reason, he'd admit to himself. The trail she took was narrow, twisting, choked with brush. Halfway in, he had to dismount and lead his horse through the undergrowth. The sun had almost given up when he crested a ridge and saw it not a home, not really. A sagging miner's shed, a roof patched with canvas tarps, leaning against the bones of a hill. Smoke stumbled from a crooked chimney like a dying breath. Children, 5 of them, moved in and out of the doorway. The oldest, maybe 10, carried a bundle of firewood twice his size. The youngest, barefoot, stumbled in the frozen dirt until the woman Myra, he'd learned from the neat scrawl, stitched into her satchel, scooped the child up. She kissed the boy's head, murmured something too soft for Eli to catch, then carried him inside. The others worked with quiet precision. No laughter, no complaints, just motion survival disguised as routine. One fetched water from a stream where ice clung to the banks. Another mended a blanket with hands far too small for the needle. Eli lingered on the ridge until his boots went numb. Then he turned back without a sound. The next morning, a sack of flour appeared on her doorframe, his doing nailed there before sunrise. A week later, it was gone. She came to clean again, same silence, same coin left untouched. But this time, she paused at the door, just long enough to meet his eyes, then gone. From that moment, Eli stopped pretending he wasn't watching the trail. She walked home. Sometimes he left biscuits wrapped in cloth. Once, a jar of honey. She never took more than one thing, and one day a note appeared instead. Please stop. It wasn't anger. It was final. So he stopped, or tried to, because the silence she carried into his cabin felt less like distance, and more like a door he wasn't meant to open but couldn't help reaching for the handle. The boy came first, 10 years old, soot-streaked, voice too steady for someone so small. He knocked with a rhythm that felt rehearsed. When Eli opened the door, the boy held out a basket of eggs and a scrap of paper. For the help. That's all we can give. Thank you, the boy said, then turned and left before Eli could speak. That night, snow came hard, the kind that smothered roofs, killed cattle, and made the land forget. it had ever seen spring. Myra didn't come the next day, nor the one after. On the third morning, Eli couldn't stand it. He saddled his horse before dawn, rode into the hills until the trail grew too narrow, then walked the rest. Smoke no longer rose from the chimney. The roof had caved at one corner. Inside, the children were huddled under quilts, eyes wide and watchful. "Myra?" Eli asked. "She went for help yesterday," the youngest girl whispered, clutching a ragged doll. "She didn't come back." Eli left without another word. By dusk, he found her under a fallen pine, one leg twisted, one arm bent wrong. Her lips cracked, breath ragged. "I was coming back," she murmured. He didn't answer, just lifted her into his arms and carried her to his horse. By nightfall, his cabin held more life than it had in 5 years. The children clustered near the fire, silent but unafraid. Myra lay pale and still in his bed, her arms splinted with a strip of his old shirt. In the days that followed, Eli rose before sunrise to keep the fire alive, cooked when there was food, boiled water when there wasn't. The children moved like shadows, always careful, always grateful, in small ways: a nod, a folded shirt, a shared piece of bread. He never asked about the man who'd fathered them. The answers were written in Myra's bruises, in the way her eyes counted every child before she took her first breath in the morning. By the fourth day, she spoke. "I told you not to follow me," she said, voice low. "You told me a lot of things without saying a word," Eli replied. "You should have left us there." "I did," he said quietly. She didn't answer, just closed her eyes, but the space between them was no longer empty. Something unspoken had settled there, heavier than snow. Winter loosened its grip, but Eli's caution only grew. He repaired the old sled, hauled flour and a half-cured ham from Ren Valley, told the shopkeeper they were for a cousin. Myra, now moving easier, planted roots in the thawing soil, her children laughing more with each passing day. Then came the first knock. A woman, older, sharp-eyed, hair pulled so tight it looked painful. "You seen Myra Jansen?" she demanded. "Who's asking?" Eli said. "Her husband's cousin." "A lie, plain as frost. She's taken something, ran off with the children. Man's beside himself." Eli didn't flinch. "If I was hiding her, I wouldn't tell you." The woman left in a huff, but Eli rode the hills the next morning, scanning for fresh tracks. That night, he told Myra. She didn't cry, didn't panic, just pulled her children close and whispered in a tongue Eli didn't know. For a time, peace returned. Myra's arm healed enough for her to work without complaint. Clara, the youngest, called Eli Papa by accident one afternoon. Myra froze, but Eli only smiled. Then one Tuesday, a rider appeared on the West Trail, dark coat, black horse, moving like a man who expected no trouble. "You, Mercer?" he called. "I am. I'm looking for Myra Jansen." "What for?" "She's mine. Took my kids. Took my name. She's not yours." The man dismounted, slow, confident. She was always good at making men think they were saving her. That night, Eli slept with his boots on, lantern low. Myra's footsteps paused outside his door. She'd heard every word. In the days after, a half-starved stray dog followed Nathan home. They named him Scout. Myra looked at the animal like something in her had finally unclenched. But Eli saw another change, the way she lingered at the window, her hands moving slower over her work. She was planning, measuring the world in what could be carried. One morning, she told him, "Your fence is weak on the east side. Foxes will get the chickens." "I thought you didn't care for animals," he said. "I care about breakfast." It was the closest thing to a joke she'd made since he met her. And yet in her eyes, the storm was still gathering. The thaw came slow, but the change in Myra was quicker. Her spine uncoiled. A hum slipped from her throat while she folded shirts by the fire. She spoke rarely, and when she did, it landed like an iron nail in good timber. Your fence is weak on the east side, she told Eli one gray morning. Foxes will find the birds. I thought you didn't care for animals, he said. I care about breakfast. The children bloomed in the small heat of safety. Nathan laughed out loud once, a sound so new Myra's head snapped toward it like she'd misheard rain in a drought. Clara drew square houses with too many windows and hair like sunbursts. Even skittish Tommy stopped measuring doorways like escape routes. But Myra's eyes kept drifting to the hills. She packed nothing, yet everything about her looked ready to move. Eli knew that look. People who planned to leave measured the world in burdens, not belongings. That night he found her by the creek, dawn-cold water shouldering past her knees. He sat beside her without speaking. I thought about leaving, she whispered. Taking them west and vanishing again? Why didn't you? Because I think you'd follow. A beat, and I'm tired of running. They walked home in a hush that wasn't distance, but decision. The rider came on a Tuesday, black horse, dark coat, calm like a man who'd never had to prove his threats. He reined in at the edge of the yard. You Mercer? I am. I'm looking for Myra Jansen? What for? She's mine. She isn't, Eli said. The man smiled like a knife you don't see until it's too late. She was always good at making men think they were saving her. He dismounted without hurry, looked over the cabin as if choosing where to carve his initials, and left with a promise written in the tilt of his hat. That evening, Myra's footsteps paused at Eli's door. She had heard. Neither of them spoke. The lantern burned low until morning. They prepared without speeches. Eli reinforced shutters, shifted the children's pallets closer to the hearth, taught Nathan smoke signals no one else would recognize. Lissa tied bells to the back door with fishing line. Ben tucked a kitchen knife into his belt like a badge he hadn't earned but intended to grow into. Myra watched it all with a flint steadiness that made scouts sleep at her feet. At dawn, the first cut came quiet, mean, and patient. The chicken coop yawned open, hinges torn like gristle, not a feathered body left. No prints, no blood, just absence. Myra didn't curse. She knelt, lifted a handful of crushed feathers, and let the wind carry them one by one. That's how he fights, Eli said. No, she answered, voice flat. That's how he warns. When the shed burned 2 days later, the flames were small but certain. Smoke bled into the afternoon like a bad memory returning on schedule. In the bedroom, above Eli's bed, someone had nailed a singed ribbon taken from Myra's apron. Below it, carved deep into the wood, "Shy's mine." "Do we leave?" she asked. "No," Eli said. "We stopped letting him choose our weather." Myra didn't smile, but something in her face changed. Not softness, steel, cooling, into shape. She rolled her sleeve, revealing the ghost's map of old bruises, then covered it again like a door closing. "Then we stand," she said, "and we make it cost him." 3 days passed, the air thick with waiting. No rider came, but Eli felt him near in the way Scout paced the porch, tail rigid, ears forward. Then the letter appeared nailed to a tree stump at the property's edge. Folded parchment, red wax seal. Inside, just 4 lines. You made your choice, she made hers. The law is on my side. I'll come when I please. No signature. Only a thumbprint in dried blood. He's bluffing, Myra said when she read it. He won't bring lawmen, Eli agreed. But he'll bring men who speak the word like scripture and load their guns between verses. That night, lanterns moved in the distance, 3 weaving through the tree line like fireflies with direction. Eli lit the signal torch 3 bursts for Nathan, then stepped onto the porch with his shotgun. The plan had always been to buy time, let Myra and the children vanish into the hidden root cellar beneath the pantry. But when the first man stepped into the clearing, tall and broad with a rifle, and the second followed, younger and twitchy, the plan dissolved. Roland came last, hat low, smile slow. "You really think you'll stop me?" he called. "You're a fool, Mercer. She's not worth dying for." Before Eli could answer, Myra stepped from the shadows near the barn. She carried Eli's old hunting rifle like it was made for her hands. "Then come and find out," she said. Roland froze. "Myra, you burned our home. You scared my children. You think I'll let you close again?" She fired, the bullet chewing a hole in the shed inches from his shoulder. The younger man bolted. The other cursed and followed. Roland stood alone, rage and disbelief warring in his eyes. "It's more home than you ever gave me," Myra said, lowering the rifle without surrender. "Go, before I change my mind." He turned, the forest swallowing him. Inside, the children emerged from hiding, their faces lit by firelight, and something harder the understanding that this was no longer a woman running. This was a woman holding ground. Eli met her eyes. "You weren't supposed to come out." "I know. I could have handled it." "I know," she said again, then softer. "But I needed him to see I'm not his anymore." For the first time, Eli believed she truly meant it. The days after felt heavier than the night itself. The forest went still, the kind of stillness that pressed against the cabin walls. No bird song, no wind. Even the creek seemed to muffle its voice. Myra moved through the house with a new rhythm, deliberate, unhurried, as if every step was a declaration she wouldn't be chased again. Yet Eli caught her at the window before dawn, watching the horizon with eyes that measured distance. When the next knock came, it wasn't Roland. It was a clean-shaven stranger in a tidy coat, speaking with the politeness of a man who carried sharper tools in his pocket. "Ma'am," he said, tipping his hat toward Myra, "your husband has petitioned the court for custody, claims abandonment, claims instability." Myra's laugh was dry, brittle. "Instability? He broke my arm." "Do you have proof?" the man asked without flinching. Eli stepped forward. "You can leave now." The stranger mounted his horse, offering only one parting shot. "Attend the hearing, or it will be decided without you." They burned the sealed envelope he left behind, but the ash didn't take the weight from the air. Myra confessed that she had no papers, no marriage certificate, no birth records for the children, only their names and her word. "That's enough for me," Eli said. "It won't be for them," she replied. She decided they'd go to Ren Valley, speak to the Reverend who'd known her and Roland both. The trip felt like walking into a trap with eyes open, but they made it. Myra in her one good dress, hair braided tight, the children left behind with instructions and enough supplies. The Reverend was old, his voice thin, but he remembered. Remembered enough to nod when Myra asked if he'd speak truth if called upon. On the way back, Eli stepped into the general store for flour. Roland stepped out from the alley like he'd been waiting. "I'm glad you came," he said, voice dripping victory. "The law takes my side, Mercer. Always does. Especially when the woman doesn't even know how to sign her own name proper." Eli's fist landed before thought caught up. Roland staggered back, blood slick on his lip, and grinned through it. "You'll see," he said. "The law is slow, but it doesn't forget." That night, Myra stood on the porch long after the others slept, shawl drawn tight, hands gripping the rail. "I'm not afraid of losing them," she said when Eli joined her. "I'm afraid of what I'll become to keep them." "You won't become anything you're not already," he told her. And in the cold between them, she leaned not for shelter, but for steadiness. The kind you only find when you know the storm isn't done, but you're ready to meet it head on. The summons came on cream vellum, folded neat, the wax seal unbroken until Myra slit it with a paring knife. The words inside were sharp and formal, setting a date 3 days' ride south where the county court would hear Roland Jansen's claim. Myra read it twice, eyes tracing each line as if they might rearrange themselves into mercy. They didn't. "We'll go," Eli said, his hand closing over hers. "We can't take the children. They'll be safe here," he promised. "Nathan knows what to do. Lissa, too." The goodbye was short and without softness, not because love was absent, but because time was. Ben clung to her skirt. Clara sobbed into Eli's coat. Nathan stood silent, jaw set like a grown man's. Myra touched each face, holding their eyes as if memorizing them, then climbed into the wagon beside Eli. The road south unwound through thawing hills and narrow passes. They spoke little, their silence not heavy but braced, like the air before a draw. The courthouse loomed pale against the sky, whitewashed columns chipped and weathered. Inside, the air smelled of dust and old verdicts. Roland sat waiting in a pressed suit, clean-shaven, his smugness polished to a courtroom shine. The hearing moved quickly. Witnesses came: a banker, a cousin, their words threaded with half-truths and inventions. Roland painted himself the wronged husband, the abandoned father. When it was Myra's turn, she stood with the kind of stillness that makes even liars hesitate. "My children are not property," she said, voice clear, "and I was never his." She spoke of bruises, of nights when her oldest son begged her to leave, of her daughter's tears whenever Roland entered a room. She spoke without pleading, without apology. "I did not abandon them," she finished. "I saved them." The judge said little, only that his decision would be written and sent within the week. Outside, the sky hung low and cold. They rode home in silence until the cabin came into view, and the sight stopped Myra's breath. On the porch, nailed high above the steps, hung Clara's doll, torn, stained, crucified against the wood. The cellar door gaped open. Inside, the food was untouched. But the children were gone. No note, no footprints, no sound. Just absence. Eli's knees hit the floor. Myra's fingers clenched around the doll until the seams threatened to split. "Where?" she breathed. Eli closed his eyes. South Ridge. She was already moving. They rode like pursuit itself had taken the reins, hooves striking sparks off stone, wind tearing at hair and coat. No words passed between them. There was no need. The land narrowed into the hollow where Roland's cousin's old hunting cabin sat, half swallowed by pine. Eli reined in before the clearing. The place was dark, too quiet. He dismounted, rifle ready. Myra slid from her saddle, a knife in one hand, Clara's torn doll in the other. A muffled cry bled through the cabin's thin walls. Eli didn't hesitate. One kick splintered the door. Inside, the children huddled in the far corner, ropes loose around their wrists, Nathan planted in front of them like a barricade. Roland slouched in a chair opposite, glass in hand, pistol on the floor by his boot. His eyes were glassy, but the smile was sober. "You came," he said. Myra crossed the floor without flinching, dropped the doll at his feet, and bent to pick up the pistol. Roland didn't move. "Come on," she told the children. "Time to go." Roland laughed, low and jagged, but didn't rise. Eli backed them out, rifle never wavering, until the door shut between them and the man who'd tried to own their lives. They rode home in the bruised light before dawn. Clara slept in Eli's arms. Lissa clung to Myra's side. Ben stared ahead, eyes red but dry. Nathan's bare feet pressed against the wagon boards, his spine unbent. Inside the cabin, Myra sank to the floor by the hearth, the doll clasped to her chest. Eli stood over them, his hands useless for once, and for the first time since she'd stepped into his life, His own tears came not for loss, but for the fact that this chapter at least was closed. Morning found them still there, Nathan chopping wood in steady rhythm, Lissa sweeping the front room, Ben trailing Scout in the yard, Tommy glued to Myra's hand as if letting go would undo their return. No one spoke Roland's name. They didn't need to. The worst punishment for a man like him wasn't death. It was knowing he'd lost and having to live with it. The next day, Myra rose late, hair unbound, Clara curled against her. She moved with a steadiness that seemed carved from the night before. "I want to rebuild the chicken coop," she said. Eli only nodded, fetching tools without a word. They worked side by side until sunset. Nathan dug the foundation, Lissa fetched nails, Ben wandered in and out with Scout at his heels. Myra measured each board twice, hammering with precise, even blows. When the last beam stood, Eli handed her the hammer. She drove the final nail herself. That night, they all ate together, not just to fill their stomachs, but to claim the table as theirs. Nathan told a joke so poorly, Lissa rolled her eyes. Ben fell asleep in his bowl. Clara chased fireflies just beyond the doorway, her laughter cutting through the dark like a lantern. Later, Myra turned to Eli. "Will you come with me to Ren Valley tomorrow?" "For what?" "Papers. For the children. If something happens to me, I want their names protected. I want this place to be theirs." She hesitated. "And I want to change mine." "To what?" "Myra Cooper." Eli blinked. "You don't need my name." "I know, but I want it not because I'm yours, but because I'm not his." The clerk in Ren Valley barely looked up as she stamped the form. "Cooper," she said. "Welcome to the county." It wasn't a wedding. No vows, no rings. But the signed paper felt heavier than gold in Myra's hands. When they returned, Scout bounded to greet them. Nathan came with a broken chair to fix, Lissa teaching Clara to braid grass crowns, Ben showing off a splinter in his thumb, Tommy holding a lizard named Sheriff. The air smelled of pine and bread. For the first time, Myra stepped through the door not as a fugitive, not as a guest, but as Myra Cooper, in a home that was finally hers. Weeks folded into one another, each carrying the kind of work that built more than shelter. Myra taught the children to jar berries. Eli showed Nathan how to brace a windbreak. Lissa read aloud by lamplight. Ben whistled his broken tune. Tommy shadowed Myra's every step, and Clara began to sleep without clutching her doll. The shutters went green under Myra's brush, hope-colored, she called them. Eli built her a narrow shelf above the hearth for pretty useless things, a blue stone from the creek, a pine cone shaped like a rose, a child's drawing of the cabin framed in barnwood. One evening, with the sky silvering before stormlight, Eli took her hand and led her behind the barn. The wild plot he'd once let grow to weeds now stood marked with stakes and string. "A second cabin," he said, "for the children when they're grown, so they'll always have a place that's theirs." She stared at the staked earth, the idea taking root in her eyes. "Let's do it." The work began at dawn, each board lifted with more than muscle, each nail driven like a promise. At night, they'd sit on the porch, the stars sharp above them, the smell of fresh-cut wood lingering in the air. It was then she asked him, "Do you ever wonder how different it might have been?" "Every day," he said. "And do you regret it?" He thought for a long moment. "No, because it brought me here." She kissed him then, not desperate, not shy, certain. Years would pass, each season carving its own mark into the land and into them. Ben grew tall and loud. Lissa married a traveling bookkeeper and named her first daughter Myra. Nathan took over the fields and built 2 more cabins. Tommy became a teacher. Clara grew into something no one could have predicted, bold, brilliant, impossible to contain. Myra became what she had always been beneath the scars, a matriarch, a story whispered between fence posts and firesides. Not because she was rescued, but because she rebuilt, because she endured, because she learned that love could be chosen without fear. Eli grew older at her side, his hands worn, his eyes steady. Every evening they sat on the porch together, watching their worlds stretch beyond the boundaries they once thought were all they had. The cabin, once a refuge, had become a root deep enough to hold against any storm, strong enough to shelter those who came after. And the name Cooper, written in Myra's own hand, was no longer just proof of freedom. It was the mark of a life remade. They weren't simply survivors anymore. They were home.